My name is Manuel, 27 years old, and I never thought a simple family breakfast would change everything. There we sat, Sunday morning, my parents beaming as Dad announced, "We've booked a trip to Italy, just the 6 of us. You understand, right?" I nodded, smiling. "Yeah, of course. What else could I say?" That night I got a bank alert. $9,200 charged from Rome, Venice, Florence. They had already left, without me. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt left out by the people who should love you most. Trust me, what happened next changed my life forever. Growing up in our suburban Chicago home, I was always caught in the middle. My father, Carlos, a successful architect with perpetually high expectations, ruled our household with unwavering standards. He was the kind of man who planned your entire life before you could even spell your name, especially for his sons. My mother, Diana, a warm-hearted elementary school teacher, often served as the buffer between my father's rigid expectations and us kids. I have 2 siblings, who always seemed to fit perfectly into their roles. My brother Javier, 32, the golden child who followed Dad into architecture, and my sister Sophia, 30, the brilliant doctor who made our parents burst with pride at every dinner party. Then there's Elena, my younger sister at 23, the baby of the family who could do no wrong. And then there was me, Manuel, perpetually struggling to find my place. "Manuel needs to apply himself more," became my father's mantra throughout my childhood. Not quite as disciplined as Javier, not quite as naturally brilliant as Sophia, not quite as charming as Elena. I was the middle child in every sense, desperately trying to carve out an identity that would make my father look at me the way he looked at my siblings. The dynamics in our family shifted dramatically when I was 15. That summer, the foundation of our family cracked when we discovered my father had been having an affair with a woman named Isabella. The revelation nearly destroyed our home, but what made it infinitely worse was learning that Isabella had a 7-year-old son named Matteo, my father's son. I still remember the night we found out. My mother collapsed in the kitchen. A pile of photographs sprawled across the floor showing my father with another family. The screaming, the crying, the slamming doors. For 3 weeks we thought our parents would divorce. Sophia and Javier tried to hold things together while I burned with a rage I couldn't control, and Elena, just 11 then, cried herself to sleep each night. But my mother, with a strength I still cannot comprehend, made the decision to forgive. "We will work through this," she told us one evening, her eyes red but her voice steady. As a family, what I wasn't prepared for was my father's next announcement. Matteo and Isabella would become part of our lives. My mother had agreed to it as part of their reconciliation. While my siblings reluctantly accepted this new reality, I wouldn't. This boy wasn't my brother. This woman wasn't family. They were the physical embodiment of my father's betrayal. "You'll come around, Manuel," my father said, patting my shoulder with that condescending smile. Family is family. But whose family was I in now? Before Matteo, our family vacations were sacred traditions. Every summer, my parents would take all 4 of us on a 2-week trip. We explored the Grand Canyon, camped in Yellowstone, drove the California coast, visited Disney World. These trips were the few times my father seemed to relax, to actually enjoy being around us rather than constantly evaluating our progress in life. After Matteo entered the picture, these vacations became battlegrounds. I refused to go if Matteo was invited. My father called me childish and selfish. My mother begged me to try. So we compromised for years, some trips with Matteo, some without. But I noticed how my father's eyes lit up around his youngest son, how he patiently taught him to fish when he'd berated me for not figuring it out quickly enough, how he praised Matteo's mediocre grades when he'd lectured me for my B's. As I grew older, I tried to rise above it. I went to college, earned my finance degree, and secured a good job at an investment firm in Chicago. I lived just 20 minutes from my parents, but maintained a careful distance, showing up for important holidays and occasional Sunday brunches, keeping conversations superficial, and always leaving before Matteo and Isabella arrived. I thought I had established a workable détente with the situation. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. My life at 27 revolved around my career at Dawson Financial Partners. As a junior investment analyst, I worked 70-hour weeks, desperate to prove myself worthy of the promotion that had been dangled in front of me for months. My relationship with Gabriella, my girlfriend of 2 years, was beginning to show cracks from my constant absence and exhaustion. "You're always either working or recovering from work," Gabriella said during one of our increasingly frequent arguments. "I feel like I'm dating your voicemail." She wasn't wrong. Between the crushing pressure at work and my student loans, still $120,000 to go, I barely had time to breathe, let alone build a proper relationship. But Gabriella was patient, more patient than I deserved, and stuck with me despite my growing obsession with professional success. I had been keeping my family at arm's length for years, limiting our interactions to occasional dinners and obligatory holiday gatherings. But in the weeks leading up to that fateful Sunday breakfast, I noticed some strange patterns emerging. My mother, who typically called me at least twice a week, suddenly became scarce. When we did speak, her voice had a strained quality, as if she was hiding something. My siblings, usually active in our family group chat, had gone suspiciously quiet. There were cryptic messages exchanged about the plan and the big surprise that stopped whenever I entered the conversation. Then came the family meeting I wasn't invited to. Elena accidentally mentioned it during a quick coffee meetup. "I thought you couldn't make it on Thursday," she said, stirring her latte. "That's what Mom told us." "Thursday? What was Thursday?" I asked, feeling that familiar knot form in my stomach. Elena's eyes widened slightly before she smoothly changed the subject. But the damage was done. Something was happening in my family, and I was being deliberately kept out of it. Still, I wasn't prepared for that Sunday breakfast. My mother had called, insisting I come over. "It's been too long, mijo," she said, using the endearment she knew I couldn't resist. "Everyone will be there, 9 a.m. sharp." When she said everyone, I assumed she meant my siblings. I arrived to find not only Sofia, Javier, and Elena, but also Isabella and Mateo seated around the dining table. My father stood at the head, carving a ham with practiced precision, looking more relaxed than I had seen him in months. The conversation flowed around me as I picked at my eggs, feeling once again like an outsider looking in. Sofia talked about her residency, Javier about his latest architectural project. Mateo, now 17, chatted excitedly about his college applications. I noticed how my father beamed at him, asking follow-up questions, offering advice. When had he ever shown that kind of interest in my future? Then, as my mother served coffee, my father cleared his throat dramatically. "Your mother and I have an announcement," he said, reaching for her hand. "We've booked a trip to Italy. 2 weeks, all expenses paid. Rome, Venice, Florence, the Amalfi Coast. Just the 6 of us." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt 5 pairs of eyes dart toward me, then quickly away. "Just the 6 of us," my father repeated, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "You understand, right, Manuel? With your work schedule and everything." I should have said something, should have asked what he meant by 6, should have demanded clarification. But years of avoiding conflict with my father took over. I nodded, my lips forming a tight smile. "Yeah, of course," I said, the words acid in my mouth. "Sounds great." The relief around the table was palpable. My mother's shoulders relaxed slightly, though her eyes remained troubled. Sofia and Javier exchanged quick glances. Elena looked down at her plate. Only Mateo seemed genuinely excited, talking rapidly about the Colosseum and Vatican City. I left shortly after, making excuses about a work project. My mother hugged me tightly at the door, whispering, "We'll talk later, okay?" But we didn't. And later that night, everything became crystal clear. The notification came at 11:37 p.m. as I was reviewing financial projections for a client meeting. A bank alert on my phone. "Unusual spending activity detected on your joint family credit card. $9,200 at Hotel Artemide, Rome, Italy." The family credit card. The one my parents had insisted all adult children remain on for emergencies. The one I rarely used but paid my share on each month. the one that was now being used to fund a vacation I wasn't invited to. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Had they left already? Without even saying goodbye? With trembling fingers, I called my mother, straight to voicemail. My father, voicemail. Sophia, Javier, Elena, all voicemail. Even Mateo, whose number I rarely used, didn't answer. I sent text after text, growing increasingly frantic. Nothing. I opened Instagram, a platform I seldom checked, and there it was. Posted 1 hour ago. Sophia smiling broadly in what was unmistakably an airplane seat, captioned, "Italy bound. Family adventure begins. Rome family vacation," with a geotag showing Rome Fiumicino Airport. My stomach twisted into knots as I scrolled through the comments. "Have an amazing time. Take lots of pictures. So jealous. My own siblings hadn't even told me they were leaving tonight. Sleep was impossible." At dawn, I drove to my parents' house, using the spare key I still had to let myself in. The house was immaculate. Mail held at the post office. Plants moved to the neighbors. In my parents' bedroom, I found their detailed itinerary printed and left on the dresser, a 14-day tour of Italy's greatest hits, with 6 names clearly listed: Carlos, Diana, Javier, Sofia, Elena, Matteo. My name was nowhere to be found. I sat on their bed, the paper crumpling in my hand, as the full weight of the situation crashed down on me. They hadn't just excluded me from a vacation, they had replaced me with Matteo, the 6 of them, a perfect family unit, while the difficult middle child was left behind. As I was leaving, I noticed an envelope in the mailbox with my name on it. Inside was a letter from my father and a check for $500. "Manuel," it read in my father's precise handwriting. "We thought it best not to disrupt your work schedule with this family trip. You've mentioned many times how important this quarter is for your promotion prospects. Consider this a small token to treat yourself while we're away. Perhaps take Gabriella somewhere nice. We'll bring you back a souvenir. Love, Dad." A consolation prize. $500 to make up for excluding me from a family tradition, as if I could be bought off so cheaply. As if my presence in the family was so easily dispensed with. The neighbor, Mrs. Patel, spotted me as I stood frozen by the mailbox. "Manuel, I didn't expect to see you here," she called, watering her hydrangeas. "Your parents were so excited about their trip. Said it's been years since they had all 6 together for a proper vacation." 6. There it was again. The magic number that excluded me. "When did they leave?" I managed to ask. "Last night around 8. Your father was worried about traffic to O'Hare." She tilted her head. "I thought you knew all this. Just double-checking the details." I lied, retreating to my car. Back in my apartment, I dug deeper, now determined to understand exactly what had happened. I found the flight confirmation in our shared family email: 6 tickets to Rome, departing 10 p.m. the previous night. Paid for entirely by my father. Hotel reservations for 3 rooms at luxury accommodations throughout Italy. Restaurant bookings for 6 people. The planning for this trip must have started months ago. While I'd been killing myself at work, attending family dinners when I could, my entire family had been conspiring to take a vacation without me. And not just any vacation. The dream European trip my mother had talked about for years. The most painful discovery came from Elena's cloud photo storage that we still shared from when I had helped set up her phone. Recent photos showed shopping trips for new luggage, family dinners I hadn't been invited to where they clearly discussed the trip, and even a pre-vacation celebration at my parents' house just 2 days earlier. In one photo, they were all raising glasses in a toast. Even Isabella was there, beaming proudly as Matteo stood surrounded by what should have been my family. The caption read, "Can't wait for our Italian adventure. Familia forever. Familia, forever, just not with me." For 3 days, I didn't leave my apartment, didn't shower, barely ate. I called in sick to work, something I had never done before, and ignored the increasingly concerned messages from my team. The blinds stayed closed as I alternated between sleeping for exhausted stretches and staring blankly at the ceiling, replaying every family interaction from the past several months, looking for clues I had missed. On the fourth day, my phone rang with a call from Thomas, my direct supervisor at Dawson Financial. "Manuel, what the hell is going on? You missed the Hertzfeld presentation. Robert had to step in last minute, and he wasn't prepared." "I'm sick," I mumbled, my voice hoarse from disuse. "For 3 days with no proper communication? This isn't like you. Do you need to see a doctor? Do you need the company health advocate to call you?" "No, I just need time." I couldn't bring myself to explain what had happened. How could I tell my boss that I was lying in the dark because my family had decided I wasn't worth including? "Manuel, I'm concerned. Take the rest of the week if you need it, but I expect a detailed email about the Hertzfeld account by tomorrow. And when you come back Monday, we need to have a serious conversation about your commitment level." The implication was clear. My job, the thing I had sacrificed so much for, was now in jeopardy too. Shortly after Thomas's call, there was a knock at my door. I ignored it until a key turned in the lock. Gabriella, using the emergency key I had given her. She gasped when she saw me and the state of my apartment. Takeout containers piled up, clothes strewn about. Me, unshowered and hollow-eyed on the couch. "Manuel, what happened? Your boss called me when he couldn't reach you again. I've been texting you for days." The concern in her eyes broke something inside me. I told her everything, the words pouring out in a jumbled, emotional mess. The breakfast, the bank alert, the investigation, the letter with its insulting check. By the time I finished, I was sobbing, something I hadn't done since I was a child. Gabriella held me, stroking my hair, murmuring soothing words. But even through my emotional haze, I could sense her confusion. "Maybe they really did think they were doing what was best for you," she suggested gently. "You have been so focused on work lately. Maybe they didn't want to distract you?" Her words, intended to comfort, felt like another betrayal. "They replaced me with Matteo," I said flatly. "They chose him over me." "I don't think that's fair, Manuel. Matteo is your brother too." "Half-brother," I corrected sharply. "From my father's affair, the affair that nearly destroyed our family." Gabriella pulled back slightly. "It's been 12 years, Manuel. At some point, don't you think you need to accept the reality of your family as it is now, not how you wish it was?" Her response ignited a fury inside me. So I should just accept being erased? Being the only one excluded from a family vacation? Being replaced by the living reminder of my father's betrayal? That's not what I'm saying. I just think, you don't understand. You can't understand. I stood up, pacing the small living room. Your family isn't fractured like mine. Your father didn't cheat and bring home another kid and expect everyone to just smile and play happy family. As my anger grew, memories flooded back. All the times I had felt sidelined in favor of Matteo. My father missing my college graduation ceremony because Matteo had a soccer tournament. The way holiday gifts seemed to grow more extravagant for him, while becoming increasingly practical for me. The proud Facebook posts about Matteo's achievements, while my promotion at work warranted only a perfunctory congratulations text. In a burst of rage, I grabbed a framed family photo from the bookshelf. The last vacation I had gone on with them, 3 years ago, and hurled it against the wall. The glass shattered, skittering across the hardwood floor. Gabriella flinched. "Manuel, you're scaring me." "You should go," I said, suddenly exhausted. "I need to be alone." "I don't think that's a good idea right now. Please, Gabriella, just go." She left reluctantly, making me promise to call her later. I didn't. Instead, I opened a bottle of whiskey I had been saving for a special occasion and began drinking directly from it. As the alcohol took effect, I scrolled through social media, torturing myself with the steady stream of photos being posted from Italy. My family looking happy, complete, without me. The pattern continued for days. I would go to work, barely functional, return home, drink, and spiral further. I stopped answering Gabriella's calls, stopped responding to non-urgent work emails, started showing up late to meetings. Robert, my colleague who had covered the Hertzfeld presentation, began giving me concerned looks in the break room. "Everything okay, man?" he asked one day. "You don't seem like yourself lately." I brushed him off with vague excuses about not sleeping well. How could I explain that my identity was collapsing? That the narrative I had constructed, of being the hard-working son temporarily sidelined by a half-brother, but still fundamentally part of the family, had been revealed as a convenient fiction? 1 week into my family's Italian vacation, Gabriella showed up at my apartment again. This time her expression was resolute, rather than concerned. "We need to talk," she said, sitting primly on the edge of my couch. "I can't do this anymore, Manuel. I can't watch you self-destruct like this." "I'm fine," I lied, even as my hands trembled slightly. "You're not fine. You're drinking too much. You're risking your job. And you're shutting me out completely." She took a deep breath. "I think we need to take a break. You're breaking up with me? Now?" The disbelief in my voice was genuine. "When I'm going through the worst time of my life? I'm not breaking up with you. I'm saying we need space while you figure things out. I've tried to be here for you, but you won't let me in. You're lashing out at me for things I have no control over." She was right, of course. But in that moment, all I could feel was another rejection, another person deciding I wasn't worth the effort. "Fine," I said coldly. "Go. Everyone else has." The hurt that flashed across her face should have stopped me, should have made me apologize immediately. Instead, I watched in detached silence as she placed her key to my apartment on the coffee table and walked out. Alone again, I did the one thing I had been avoiding. I called my father. It was 3 a.m. in Italy, but I didn't care. To my surprise, he answered, his voice thick with sleep. "Manuel, is everything okay?" The concern in his voice enraged me further. "No, Dad. Everything is not okay. How could you do this? How could you all just leave without me? Manuel, we discussed this at breakfast. You said you understood. You never actually asked me. You never said, 'Manuel, we're going to Italy, but you're not invited because we're taking Matteo instead.' You just expected me to read between the lines and accept being excluded." My father's voice hardened. "You're overreacting. This isn't about excluding you. It's about including Matteo. He's part of this family too." "And I'm not? Is that it? One in, one out? Was there a family vote I missed?" "You're being childish," he said dismissively. "This is exactly why we thought it best to give you some space. Your attitude about Matteo after all these years is getting tiresome." His words hit like physical blows. "My attitude? He's the product of your affair. You broke Mom's heart, nearly destroyed our family, and then expected us all to welcome him with open arms." "That's enough," my father barked. "Your mother has forgiven me. Your siblings have accepted Matteo. You're the only one still clinging to the past. Grow up, Manuel." I laughed bitterly. "Grow up? That's rich coming from you. Tell me, Dad, does it make you feel better to pretend you have 3 sons instead of 2? Does Matteo help you forget what a disappointment I am to you?" The silence that followed told me I had hit a nerve. "We'll discuss this when we return," he finally said. "When you're thinking more clearly, don't bother. Enjoy your perfect family vacation. I hope it was worth it." I hung up and hurled my phone across the room. Then I grabbed my car keys and the whiskey bottle, still half full. The world swayed as I made my way to the parking garage. Some distant part of my brain knew I shouldn't be driving, but the larger part didn't care anymore. I was halfway to the garage elevator when I tripped, falling hard on the concrete. The bottle shattered, glass and liquor spreading across the floor. The sound echoed in the empty garage, joined seconds later by my broken sobs. I could have died that night. Would have, if I had managed to get behind the wheel. Instead, I crawled back to my apartment and passed out on the bathroom floor, rock bottom finally reached. 2 weeks had passed since that fateful Sunday breakfast. 2 weeks of emotional freefall, of watching my life unravel thread by thread. The social media updates from Italy continued relentlessly. My father posting about a wonderful tour of the Vatican, my mother beaming in front of the Trevi Fountain, Sophia and Elena posing on a gondola in Venice, Javier and Matteo sharing gelato by the Spanish Steps. Each image was another twist of the knife, but what hurt most were the captions. "Making memories with the whole family. Nothing better than traveling with the people you love most. So blessed to have everyone together for this once-in-a-lifetime trip. Everyone. Whole family. All lies. Work had become a minefield. After showing up late to an important client meeting, slurring slightly from the previous night's drinking, Thomas had pulled me aside. "This is your final warning, Manuel," he said, his disappointment evident. "You've been with us for 4 years. You were on track for senior analyst. But this behavior, it's unacceptable. One more incident, and I'll have no choice but to let you go." I nodded mutely, unable to formulate a defense. The truth was, I no longer cared. The job I had sacrificed so much for, missed birthdays, canceled dates, endless late nights, suddenly seemed meaningless. What was the point of success if the people who should be proudest of you didn't even want you around? That afternoon, a call came from an Italian number. Expecting my father, I answered with a combative, "What?" Instead, it was Elena's voice. "Manuel, it's me." My youngest sister had always been the peacemaker in the family, the one who stayed out of conflicts. Hearing her voice cracked something inside me. "Are you enjoying Italy?" I asked bitterly. "No," she said quietly. "I mean, it's beautiful here, but it's not right without you." Her sincerity caught me off guard. "Then why didn't anyone say anything? Why did you all just go along with it?" Elena was silent for a moment. "I did say something. So did Sophia. Even Matteo was upset when he realized you weren't coming." Matteo was upset? The concept was foreign to me. In my mind, Matteo had always been the usurper, happy to take my place. He cried, "Manuel." He asked Dad why you weren't coming, said it didn't feel right. Dad told him you were too busy, that you chose not to come. The revelation staggered me. That's a lie. I was never given a choice. "I know that now," Elena said, her voice breaking. "Mom knows too. She's been crying every night. But Dad, he was so determined to have this trip with Matteo before he goes to college. He convinced everyone it was what you wanted too." The pieces were finally clicking into place. "So Dad made the executive decision to exclude me." "Yes," Elena admitted, "and we were all too cowardly to challenge him directly." "I'm so sorry, Manuel. I should have called you right away." As we talked, I learned more painful details. How my father had initially planned the trip for all of us, but when scheduling conflicts arose with Matteo's college orientation dates, he made the choice to move the trip earlier, to dates he knew conflicted with my big work presentation. How he had justified it to the family by pointing out how rarely I attended family functions anyway. How he had painted me as the villain who didn't care enough about family to make time. "He manipulated all of you," I said, anger rising again. "We let ourselves be manipulated," Elena corrected gently, "because it was easier than standing up to him. Easier than admitting our family has never really healed from what happened with Matteo." After talking to Elena, I felt a strange hollowness, as if the white-hot rage that had been sustaining me had burned out, leaving only cold ashes. The truth didn't make the exclusion hurt less, but it redistributed the pain. My siblings weren't conspirators, they were cowards. My mother wasn't rejecting me. She was trying to keep peace. Even Matteo, whom I had resented for so long, wasn't the enemy I had constructed in my mind. Only my father had deliberately pushed me out. And for what? To pretend he had a perfect, harmonious family? To avoid dealing with the complicated reality of our relationship? The next day at work, the emotional dam finally broke. During a strategy meeting for a new client, Thomas asked me a direct question about market projections. I stared at him blankly, my mind completely empty. "Manuel? The third quarter projections for Apex Industries?" I opened my mouth, but instead of financial data, what came out was a choked sob. Then another. To my horror, I began crying uncontrollably in front of my entire team, 8 colleagues watching in stunned silence as I broke down completely. Thomas quickly ended the meeting and ushered everyone out, then sat across from me, sliding a box of tissues over. "Talk to me, Manuel. What's really going on?" Through fragmented sentences and more tears than I had shed in years, I told him about my family situation, about being the only one excluded from the Italy trip, about the drinking, the fight with Gabriella, the near accident that could have ended everything. To my surprise, Thomas didn't look disgusted or disappointed. He looked concerned. "Why didn't you tell me any of this was happening?" he asked. "We could have adjusted your workload, given you some personal days." "I didn't want to seem weak," I admitted. "Unprofessional." Thomas sighed heavily. "Manuel, we're not robots. Everyone has personal crises. Everyone needs support sometimes." He leaned forward. "Take the rest of the week off. Paid leave. See a therapist. The company insurance covers it. But when you come back, I need the focused, brilliant analyst I hired, not this." I nodded, grateful for the compassion but humiliated by the public breakdown. As I packed up my things, Robert appeared in the doorway of my office. "Hey," he said awkwardly. "A bunch of us are going for drinks at Sullivan's on Friday. If you're feeling up to it, you should come." It was a small gesture, but it almost set me off crying again. "Thanks. I'll think about it." That night, I tried calling Gabriella. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail apologizing for my behavior, but it felt inadequate, just words into the void. Alone in my apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of the past 2 weeks, I hit the lowest point of my despair. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the family photos I still kept, lingering on ones from before Matteo entered our lives. Happy images of an intact family that no longer existed. Had never really existed, perhaps. The most recent family photo I had was from Christmas, 7 months ago. We were all arranged around the tree, my parents in the center, Sofia and Javier to one side, Elena and me to the other, with Matteo standing slightly apart, as if unsure of his place. Looking at it now, I noticed something I hadn't before. Matteo's smile seemed forced, his body language tense. He looked exactly how I felt in family gatherings, like an outsider trying to belong. For the first time, I wondered if Matteo had been struggling all these years too. If behind the preferential treatment from my father, he had been battling his own demons of belonging. The thought was uncomfortable, challenging the narrative I had constructed for so long. I scrolled to another photo, this one from my college graduation. My mother beaming proudly, me in cap and gown, my siblings clustered around. My father had arrived late, missing the ceremony because of Matteo's soccer tournament, making it only in time for photos. The resentment I had felt that day came flooding back, but now mixed with a new question. Had I been blaming Matteo for decisions my father made? As midnight approached, my phone lit up with a text from Gabriella. "I hope you're okay. I'm still upset, but I'm here if you need to talk." Those simple words were a lifeline thrown into the darkness. I hadn't lost everything yet. There was still something to salvage, if only I could find the strength to reach for it. I called her immediately, surprised when she answered. "I'm sorry," I said, the words inadequate but necessary. "I've been horrible to you. You didn't deserve any of it." "No, I didn't," she agreed, her voice gentle but firm. "But I understand you're in pain. That's no excuse. I took it out on you because you were there, because you're safe." I paused, gathering my courage. "I need help, Gabriella. I don't know how to process all this. I don't know how to move forward." Her soft exhale carried both relief and lingering hurt. "That's the first step, Manuel. Admitting you need help." We talked for hours that night, really talked in a way we hadn't in months. About my family, about my feelings of inadequacy and rejection, about the ways I had been using work to avoid dealing with deeper issues, about the drinking which we both acknowledged had become problematic. "What are you going to do when they come back?" she asked eventually. "You can't avoid them forever." "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to cut them off completely. Another part still craves their approval, as pathetic as that sounds." "It's not pathetic to want your family's love," Gabriella said. "But maybe it's time to redefine what family means to you. Who deserves to be in your inner circle?" As we were saying goodbye, Gabriella said something that would stay with me. "Manuel, you keep looking for validation from people who don't know how to give it to you. Maybe it's time to learn how to validate yourself." Sleep came easier that night, though my dreams were troubled. I was walking through an Italian piazza, searching for my family among the crowds. Every time I spotted them and called out, they would turn a corner and disappear. I woke up with tears on my face, but also with a strange sense of clarity. My family would be returning in 3 days. I needed to decide who I wanted to be when they did. The near accident in the parking garage had been a wake-up call, but my conversation with Gabriella was the turning point. The next morning, instead of reaching for my phone to check social media, I made a decision. I would reclaim control of my life. Starting now. First, I called a therapist whose number Thomas had given me. The receptionist offered an appointment for the following week. "Do you have anything sooner?" I asked, surprising myself with the urgency. "It's important." She found an opening for that afternoon. One small victory. Next, I sent an email to Thomas, thanking him for the personal days and outlining a plan to catch up on my work remotely. I wouldn't let my career become another casualty of this family crisis. The apartment was next. I spent hours cleaning, throwing away takeout containers, washing dishes that had piled up, changing sheets, and opening windows to let in fresh air. Each completed task felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself. As I was organizing my desk, my phone rang. It was Henry, my closest friend from college, who now lived in Boston. We hadn't spoken in months, both of us caught up in our busy lives. "Manuel, I've been trying to reach you for days," he said. "Robert from your office called me, said he was worried about you." I was touched that Robert had gone to the trouble of finding Henry's contact information. "It's a long story," I said with a sigh. "I've got time." So I told him everything, holding nothing back. Unlike Gabriella, who was too close to the situation, or my colleagues, who only knew the professional version of me, Henry had known me during my college years when the wounds from my father's affair were still fresh. He understood the context in a way few others could. "You know what the craziest part is?" I said after recounting the whole saga. "I'm 27 years old, and I'm still desperately seeking my father's approval. How pathetic is that?" "It's not pathetic," Henry countered. "It's human. But Manuel, from what you've told me, you've been chasing something that doesn't exist. Your father is never going to be the person you need him to be. Then what do I do? You decide what you want your life to look like. Not what your father wants. Not what will make you look successful to others. What will make you feel whole." After talking to Henry, I made another decision. I wouldn't sit around waiting for my family to return, anticipating their calls, bracing for the inevitable awkward conversations. Instead, I would take control of the narrative. I booked a plane ticket to Barcelona for the following week, a place I had always wanted to visit but had never made time for. If my family could have their Italian vacation without me, I could damn well have my own European adventure. When I told Gabriella about my plan over coffee that evening, her face lit up with genuine pleasure. "That's perfect, Manuel. A fresh perspective might be exactly what you need." She hesitated. "I wish I could go with you, but with the hospital rotation schedule, I think I need to do this alone anyway," I said, reaching for her hand across the table. "But I'd like to plan a trip for us when I get back, somewhere special." The therapist's office was in a converted Victorian house, warm and inviting. Dr. Phillips was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner that immediately put me at ease. "So, Manuel, what brings you here today?" she asked once we were settled. For the third time that day, I told my story. But this time, guided by Dr. Phillips' thoughtful questions, I began to see patterns I hadn't noticed before. How my father's emotional withholding had shaped my desperate need for achievement. How I had been punishing Matteo for my father's sins. How I had internalized the message that love was conditional, something to be earned rather than freely given. "What do you want from your family?" Dr. Phillips asked toward the end of our session. The question stumped me. I had spent so long trying to earn my place that I had never considered what I actually wanted from these relationships. "I want them to see me," I finally said. "Not as the difficult middle child or the workaholic or the one who hasn't accepted Matteo, just me." "Manuel," Dr. Phillips nodded. "That's a good place to start. But I want you to consider something. What if they can't give you that? What if, for whatever reason, your father is incapable of seeing you clearly? Would you be willing to create boundaries that protect you, even if it means letting go of that desire. The question lingered with me as I left her office, both uncomfortable and strangely liberating. The next day, I returned to work, not for the full day, but for a meeting with Thomas. I presented him with a detailed plan for catching up on my projects and proposed a more reasonable workload going forward. I've been using work to avoid dealing with personal issues, I admitted. It's not sustainable or healthy. Thomas seemed surprised by my candor but nodded approvingly. I've been concerned about your hours for a while. This seems like a good adjustment. Robert caught me in the hallway afterward. You look better, he said simply. I feel better. Or at least, on the way there. I hesitated. Thanks for reaching out to Henry. It meant a lot. That's what teammates do, he said with a shrug. So, Sullivan's tomorrow? First round's on me. I smiled, the gesture feeling unfamiliar after weeks of scowling. I'll be there. That evening I did something I had been avoiding. I opened my journal and began to write about my feelings toward my family, starting from the earliest memories of trying to please my father, through the trauma of discovering his affair, to the present crisis. I wrote until my hand cramped, filling page after page with thoughts I had never fully articulated even to myself. The writing was cathartic, bringing clarity to emotions that had been a tangled mess. By the time I finished, I had made several decisions about how to proceed when my family returned. First, I would not rush to see them. They had chosen to exclude me. I would not eagerly show up at the airport as if nothing had happened. Second, I would speak with my mother individually before confronting my father. From what Elena had said, my mother had been troubled by my exclusion. I needed to understand her perspective. Third, I would write an email to my father laying out exactly how his actions had affected me. Not in anger, but with clear boundaries about what I would and would not accept going forward. And finally, perhaps most challenging, I would try to separate Matteo from my feelings about my father. The 17-year-old had not asked to be born into this complicated situation. According to Elena, he had even been upset about my exclusion from the trip. Maybe it was time to see him as an individual rather than a symbol of my father's betrayal. The next day, I met with Dr. Phillips again and shared these decisions. She nodded approvingly. These are excellent boundaries, Manuel. The key will be maintaining them when faced with pressure to fall back into old patterns. I know. It won't be easy. I thought about my father's dismissive tone, his ability to make me feel childish for having legitimate feelings. But I can't keep living like this. No, she agreed. You can't, and recognizing that is huge progress. That night, I joined my colleagues at Sullivan's. It was the first time I had socialized with them outside of work functions. To my surprise, I enjoyed myself. They were smart, funny people with lives and interests beyond spreadsheets and market projections. As Robert drove me home, slightly tipsy but nowhere near my dangerous drinking of previous weeks, he said something that stuck with me. You know, I always thought you were this super intense workaholic with no personality. It's nice to see there's an actual human being in there. I laughed. I'm trying to find him myself. The weekend arrived, and with it, the knowledge that my family would be returning the next day. Instead of obsessing over their arrival, I focused on preparations for my own trip. I researched Barcelona, booked a small apartment in the Gothic Quarter, made lists of places to visit. I bought a new camera, something I had always wanted but had dismissed as frivolous. Gabriella came over to help me pack, our relationship slowly mending with each honest conversation. As she folded shirts into my suitcase, she asked the question I had been dreading. Will you see your family before you leave for Barcelona? I nodded. My mother and probably my siblings. Not my father, not yet. And Matteo? I sighed. I don't know. Part of me wants to talk to him, to really see who he is without my resentment coloring everything. But another part worries it would feel like a betrayal of myself. Gabriella sat on the bed beside me. Manuel, forgiving Matteo for existing isn't a betrayal of yourself. It might actually be the most freeing thing you could do. Later, as I updated my calendar with my travel dates, I noticed something significant. The day I would return from Barcelona was my birthday. I had completely forgotten in the chaos of recent weeks. It seemed fitting somehow, coming back on the day that marked the beginning of my life, hopefully with a new perspective, a new version of myself. Sunday morning, I received a text from my mother. "We're home, mijo. Please come see us." I replied simply, "Not today. I'll call tomorrow." It was a small act of assertiveness, but it felt momentous. For once, I was setting the terms of engagement, rather than eagerly responding to their summons. That night, I wrote the email to my father that I had been composing in my mind for days. It was long but controlled, explaining exactly how his decision to exclude me had affected me, the pain it had caused, and the damage it had done to our already fragile relationship. I set clear expectations for any future interaction: respect for my feelings, acknowledgement of the hurt caused, and no more manipulative tactics. I ended it with, "I am taking time away to think about what kind of relationship I want with you going forward. I hope you will use this time to consider whether you want a genuine relationship with me, your son, or simply the idea of me that fits into your perfect family narrative. The choice is yours, but either way, I will no longer accept being treated as an afterthought." I saved the draft, planning to review it once more before sending. Then I booked a rental car to drive to the airport on Tuesday, packed the last few items for my trip, and for the first time in weeks, slept through the night without nightmares. My family had been back for 3 days when I finally agreed to see my mother. We met at a small cafe halfway between our homes, neutral territory where neither of us would have the home field advantage. She looked tired, the Italian sun having done little to erase the worry lines around her eyes. When she saw me, she stood and opened her arms. I hesitated only briefly before stepping into her embrace. "I'm so sorry, Manuel," she whispered against my shoulder. "So very sorry." We sat across from each other, 2 cups of coffee between us like a buffer zone. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "Why did you go along with it?" I finally asked. "You must have known how much it would hurt me." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "I convinced myself you wouldn't mind, that you were too busy with work, that you never seemed to enjoy family gatherings anyway." She shook her head. "But that was just what I told myself to avoid confronting your father. The truth is, I was a coward. Again." "Again?" "When your father had the affair, when Mateo came into our lives, I made choices to keep the family together. Choices that hurt you, specifically because you were the one who couldn't pretend everything was fine." She reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly. "I've always admired your honesty, Manuel, your refusal to accept convenient lies. But it made you the difficult one, the one who wouldn't just go along." Her words were both validation and a fresh wound. "So I was punished for not pretending." "Yes," she admitted. "And it was wrong of us, wrong of me. I should have protected you more." We talked for hours, peeling back layers of family dynamics that had been operating below the surface for years. How my father's guilt over the affair had transformed into overcompensation with Mateo. How my mother's fear of another family rupture had led her to enable my father's preferential treatment. How my siblings had learned to navigate these troubled waters by simply avoiding conflict. "Elena called me from Italy," I told her. "She said Mateo was upset about my exclusion." My mother nodded. "He was. He's always looked up to you, you know, even though you've kept your distance." That revelation was hard to process. In my mind, Mateo had always been the usurper, the interloper. The idea that he might have been seeking my approval all along never occurred to me. "I'm leaving for Barcelona tomorrow," I said, changing the subject. "I need some time away to think." My mother looked surprised but didn't object. "When will you be back?" "On my birthday. 1 week." She smiled sadly. "We've never been apart on your birthday since you were born." "There's a first time for everything," I said, not unkindly. "This year, I'm giving myself the gift of space." "Before we parted," my mother asked, "will you see your father before you go?" I shook my head. "I've written him an email explaining how I feel. I'll send it tonight." I paused. "And Mateo? Should I see him?" A complex emotion crossed my mother's face. "That's for you to decide, Manuel. But he's not your enemy. He never was." That evening, I reviewed my email to my father one last time, made a few edits to soften the tone without compromising the message, and hit send. Then I texted Elena and Sophia, letting them know about my trip and suggesting we meet when I returned. I didn't reach out to Javier, who had always aligned himself most closely with our father. As I finished packing, my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "It's Mateo. Mom gave me your number. Can we talk before you leave?" I stared at the message for a long time, conflicting emotions swirling. Finally, I typed back, "Coffee tomorrow at 8 a.m.? The place on Lakeview?" His response was immediate. "I'll be there. Thank you." The meeting with Mateo was brief but profound. He arrived early, nervous energy evident in the way he kept adjusting his watch strap. At 17, he looked startlingly like my father at that age, based on old photos I'd seen. But his demeanor was nothing like my father's confidence. He seemed anxious, almost afraid. "I wanted to say I'm sorry about the Italy trip," he began after we had ordered. "I didn't know you weren't invited until we were already there." "It's not your fault," I said, surprised to find I meant it. It was Dad's decision. Still, he fidgeted with his coffee cup. "It didn't feel right without you. You're my brother." "Half-brother," I almost corrected automatically, but stopped myself. What purpose would that serve, except to hurt someone who was trying to connect? "I know we don't really know each other," Mateo continued, "and I know that's mostly because of how things happened with our dad. But I've always looked up to you. The way you stand your ground, how you've built your own life. I wish we could start over somehow." His earnestness was disarming. For years I had projected so much onto Mateo without ever really seeing him as a person. Looking at him now, this nervous teenager trying so hard to build a bridge, I felt ashamed of my long-held resentment. "I'd like that," I said simply. "A fresh start. When I get back from Barcelona." His face brightened. "Really? That would be awesome." We talked for another 15 minutes about his college plans, his interest in engineering, his nervousness about leaving home, normal brother stuff. As we were saying goodbye, he hesitated, then asked, "Is it okay if I text you sometimes?" "I'd like that," I repeated, and was surprised to discover it was the truth. The Barcelona trip was everything I needed. Without the constant background noise of family drama and work pressure, I could finally hear myself think. I wandered the labyrinthine streets of the Gothic Quarter, ate tapas at tiny bars, practiced my rusty Spanish with patient locals, and took hundreds of photos with my new camera. In Park Güell, surrounded by Gaudi's fantastical architecture, I sat on a mosaic bench and opened my journal. Instead of recounting old hurts, I began to write about what I wanted my life to look like going forward. What boundaries I needed to establish, not just with my family but in all relationships. What success meant to me, not to my father or my colleagues or society at large. I wrote about Gabriella, about how I had taken her support for granted, how I wanted to be a better partner. I wrote about work, acknowledging that while I enjoyed aspects of finance, I had been using it primarily as a way to prove my worth. I wrote about my siblings, about forgiving their passivity, and rebuilding those relationships on more honest foundations. And I wrote about Mateo, this young man who had carried the weight of my resentment without ever having done anything to deserve it. About how perhaps the greatest act of rebellion against my father's manipulation would be to develop a genuine brotherhood with Mateo, separate from our shared parent. On my final night in Barcelona, sitting on the rooftop terrace of my rented apartment with a glass of local wine, I checked my email for the first time in days. There, among the work messages and travel confirmations, was a response from my father. My heart raced as I opened it, bracing for defensiveness or anger. Instead, I found something unprecedented. Vulnerability. "Manuel," he began, "I've read your email many times now. My first instinct was to dismiss your feelings as an overreaction, but your mother and your therapist have helped me see that this response is exactly the problem. I have never truly listened to you." He went on to acknowledge specific instances where he had favored Mateo, not out of greater love for him but from guilt and a misguided attempt to make amends for his affair. He admitted to using my work commitment as an excuse to exclude me from the Italy trip, when the real reason was his discomfort with the tension between Mateo and me, tension he had helped create through his own actions. I don't expect forgiveness, he wrote, but I am asking for a chance to do better, to listen more and assume less, to see you as you are, not as I've imagined you to be. It wasn't a perfect apology. There were still hints of justification, moments of slipping into his authoritative father role, but it was more honesty than I had ever received from him, and it felt like a door opening where before there had only been a wall. I didn't respond immediately. This wasn't something to rush. Instead, I sat with the email, with the complex emotions it stirred, and watched the Barcelona sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. My birthday morning dawned clear and bright. As my plane touched down in Chicago, I felt a sense of homecoming that went beyond returning to familiar streets. I was coming home to myself, to a version of Manuel who knew his worth wasn't determined by his father's approval or his family's inclusion. Gabriela met me at the airport, her smile bright and genuine. "Happy birthday," she said, handing me a small wrapped package. Inside was a leather-bound journal, the cover embossed with a compass design. "For charting your new direction," she explained. My mother had organized a small dinner at her house. Just her, my siblings, Gabriela, and me. No father, no Mateo, no Isabella. It was her acknowledgement of my need for space, for a gradual reintegration into family dynamics. Over homemade paella and flan, I shared stories from Barcelona while Elena showed me photos from Italy that hadn't made it to social media, the less curated, more honest moments of their trip. For the first time in years, conversation flowed easily among us, without the undercurrent of tension that had become our norm. After dinner, as Sophia and I washed dishes side by side, she said quietly, "I should have stood up for you. We all should have." "Yes," I agreed, no longer willing to minimize my hurt to make others comfortable. "You should have," she nodded, accepting the honest response. "I'm trying to be braver now. We all are." The following weekend, I met my father for lunch at a neutral restaurant downtown. It was awkward at first, both of us armored with politeness, but gradually, as we talked about my trip, about his work, about neutral topics, the tension eased slightly. "I read your email," I finally said as dessert arrived. "I appreciate your honesty." "I meant every word," he replied, meeting my gaze directly. "I believe you. But Dad, things can't go back to how they were. I need you to understand that I'm establishing boundaries. I'll be part of family gatherings on my terms. I'll develop my own relationship with Mateo without your interference, and I expect to be treated with the same consideration you give my siblings." He nodded slowly. "That's fair, more than fair given everything." He hesitated, then added, "I'm seeing someone too, you know, a therapist. Your mother's idea, but I agreed. I'm learning a lot about myself. Not all of it flattering. It was a small admission, but from my proud father, it represented a seismic shift. In the months that followed, our family began a slow, sometimes painful restructuring. There were setbacks, my father occasionally slipping into old patterns, me sometimes overreacting from lingering hurt. But there was also progress. Family dinners became less performative and more genuine. My mother found her voice more often, no longer solely focused on keeping the peace at any cost. My relationship with Mateo evolved into something I never expected, a genuine friendship. We discovered shared interests in photography and hiking, and I found myself looking forward to our occasional outings. He wasn't the replacement son I had feared, but simply another person navigating our complicated family constellation. At work, I negotiated a more reasonable schedule with Thomas, making it clear that while I was committed to my career, I would no longer sacrifice my personal life for advancement. To my surprise, this boundary setting earned his respect rather than his disapproval. Gabriela and I grew closer through the crisis, our relationship deepening as I learned to be emotionally present rather than just physically available between work commitments. For Valentine's Day, I took her to Quebec for a weekend, the first of what we both hoped would be many adventures together. Perhaps the most profound change was internal. The desperate need for validation that had driven me for so long began to quiet. I still had moments of seeking approval, still felt the sting when my father's attention drifted elsewhere, but these reactions no longer defined me. I had learned to validate myself, to recognize my worth, independent of others' perceptions. A year after the Italy trip, my family planned another vacation, this time to Greece. When my father called to discuss dates, he said simply, "We're trying to find a week that works for everyone. When could you take time off?" It was a small thing, but it represented everything I had fought for: the right to be included, to be considered, to be seen. The greatest lesson from this painful chapter wasn't about family loyalty or forgiveness. It was about self-worth and the courage to demand respectful treatment. It was about recognizing that while we can't choose our blood relations, we can choose the terms of those relationships. Love doesn't require martyrdom or the abandonment of our own needs. Sometimes, to be loved properly, you have to teach others how to love you. And sometimes, that teaching requires the willingness to walk away if the lesson isn't learned. If you've ever felt excluded by those who should love you most, remember that your worth isn't determined by their ability to see it. Your place in this world isn't dependent on anyone making space for you. You create your own space, build your own table, write your own story. Have you ever had to establish boundaries with family members? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and like this video to help others find it. Remember, sometimes the family we choose is as important as the family we're born into. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you find the courage to stand firm in your own worth.